There was a version of you that no longer exists, not the younger version, not the version from 10 years ago that you can look back on with distance, a more recent one, the version that used to accept things you no longer accept, that used to stay quiet in moments where you now speak, that used to shrink in rooms where you now take up space. You didn't plan that change. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to become someone different. It happened in the way all real change happens, quietly, incrementally, and in moments that didn't feel significant, until you looked back and realized they had changed everything. But here is what most people never understand about transformation that actually lasts. It doesn't start with behavior, it doesn't start with habits. It doesn't start with discipline, or systems, or the right morning routine. It starts somewhere much deeper, somewhere most people never reach, and the people who never reach it change their behavior for a few weeks and then drift back to exactly who they were. Tonight, we're going into that place, the one underneath everything, where real transformation actually begins. Every year, millions of people decide to transform. They change their habits, their routines, their environments. They read the books, follow the systems, do everything they were told was the path to becoming different. And within months, most of them are back to exactly who they were, not because they were weak, not because the methods were wrong, because they started in the wrong place. Real transformation, the kind that doesn't reverse, the kind that produces a person who is genuinely different in the way they think, feel, and move through the world, does not begin with behavior. It begins with identity, with belief, with the stories a person carries about who they are, and what they're capable of, and what they deserve, and what kind of life belongs to someone like them. Change the behavior without changing the identity, and the identity wins every time. Tonight, 5 psychological layers of what real transformation actually is, and why most people never get there. Most people think transformation is about becoming someone new. It isn't. It is about becoming, more accurately, who you already were. Underneath everything that was placed on top of you, every person carries 2 identities, the one that formed in response to their environment, to the people around them, to what was required of them, to be accepted, to be safe, to survive in the specific circumstances they grew up in, and the one underneath, the one that exists before the adaptations, before the compromises, before the slow accumulation of becoming who other people needed you to be. Transformation is not addition, it is excavation, the removal, layer by layer, of the identities that were never really yours, the beliefs that were installed before you were old enough to evaluate them, the limitations that were handed to you by people who had already accepted them for themselves. This is why real transformation feels less like becoming something new and more like recognizing something that was always there, a return. Not to who you were, but to who you were before you learned to be anything else. The work is not construction. It is the slow, deliberate removal of what was never you to find what always was. Here is the part nobody puts in the self-help books. Real transformation is usually preceded by something breaking, not metaphorically. Actually, a relationship that ends in a way that forces you to examine who you were inside it. A failure significant enough that the story you told yourself about why you were different can no longer hold. A moment of clarity, painful enough that the comfortable version of reality you had been maintaining becomes impossible to sustain. This is not coincidence, this is psychology. The existing identity is not neutral, it is a structure. A defended structure built from beliefs, habits, and narratives that the mind treats as necessary for survival, and structures do not voluntarily dismantle themselves. They resist, they rationalize, they find explanations for why the current version of you is actually fine, is actually enough, is actually not the problem. What breaks the resistance is usually something the person did not choose, a disruption significant enough to crack the structure just wide enough for something new to enter the gap. Psychologists call this a disorienting dilemma, the moment when the existing framework can no longer accommodate what the person is experiencing. And it is in that moment of disorientation of the old identity not working anymore, that transformation becomes possible. Not in the comfort, not in the stability, in the crack. Which means the most painful moments of your life were not obstacles to your transformation, they were the door. Here is why most transformation doesn't last. The mind changes faster than the body. You can make a decision in a single moment. You can understand something in an afternoon. You can commit to being different, genuinely, sincerely, with full intention, and mean every word of it, and then walk into a familiar environment and feel the old version rising up like it never left. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. The body stores identity in the nervous system, in the automatic responses, in the muscle memory of social situations, the reflexive postures, the default emotional reactions that have been rehearsed thousands of times over years until they run without permission. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio described this as the body keeping a physical record of the emotional patterns the person has lived. The nervous system does not update because you decided to update. It updates through repeated new experience, through the accumulation of behaving differently in real situations enough times that the body begins to expect the new response instead of the old one. This is why transformation is not an event. It is a practice. The decision is the beginning. The repeated behavior is how the body eventually catches up, and until it does, the old version will keep appearing. Not because change isn't happening, because the nervous system takes longer than the mind to believe that the person is actually different now. There is something that happens during transformation that most people are completely unprepared for. The people who know you best will resist it. Not consciously, not out of cruelty, but when you begin to change, when the behavior shifts, when the version of you that used to be predictable starts responding differently, saying different things, holding different boundaries, taking up different space, the people around you experience a specific discomfort. Because your change asks something of them. It asks them to update the model they have of you, the role you play in a dynamic they've built their lives around, the version of you that their version of themselves makes sense in relation to. And updating that model is uncomfortable. So instead, they apply pressure. You've changed, said like an accusation. You used to be more fun. You're taking yourself too seriously. I don't know who you are anymore. These are not observations. They are attempts to return you to the version of you that was easier for them. And for many people, the social pressure is enough. The discomfort of being seen differently by the people they love is enough to make them contract, pull back, soften the edges of the new version until it resembles the old one enough for the room to feel comfortable again. Real transformation requires the willingness to be temporarily misunderstood by the people who thought they knew you, not permanently, but for long enough that the new version becomes undeniable even to the people who were most invested in the old one. There is a specific moment in genuine transformation that you cannot manufacture and cannot fake. The moment when you encounter the situation that used to define you and you respond differently without deciding to. Not because you remembered to behave better, not because you caught yourself and made the conscious correction, because the automatic response has changed. The room that used to make you small, and you walk in, and you're not small. Not because you're performing confidence, because something settled. That wasn't settled before. The person who used to be able to destabilize you with a look, with a tone, with a specific kind of silence, and you feel it, and it doesn't move you the way it used to. The pattern that has defined every significant relationship in your life, appearing again in a new form with a new person, and you see it immediately for what it is, and you don't enter it. These moments are not dramatic. They don't feel like victory. They feel like almost nothing. Like the absence of something that used to be there, and that absence is the evidence not of what you've added, of what you finally put down. The version of you that no longer exists did not disappear in a moment, it dissolved. In 100 small decisions that didn't feel significant, in the moments you chose differently, even when nobody was watching, in the times you held something that the old version would have released, in the things you released that the old version would have held. Transformation is not a destination. It is not a morning you wake up and arrive at. It is not a version of yourself that you finally become and stay. It is a direction, a continuous, imperfect, and non-linear movement toward the version of you that was always underneath, waiting to be uncovered by the slow, patient removal of everything that was placed on top. You are not finished. You will not be finished, but you are different than you were. Then you were. And you will be different than you are now. And the gap between who you are today and who you are becoming is not something to be frustrated by. It is the evidence that the work is actually happening. Most people never change. Not because they can't, because they never went deep enough to find the place where change actually begins. You went there. That's not nothing. That's everything.